Picture this. You're watching one of those classic martial arts movies. You know the exact scene I'm talking about,
Oh,
right?
yeah. The ancient, unassuming master standing in the courtyard.
Exactly. Standing there surrounded by these giant, just heavily muscled opponents. And one of the huge guys lunges, and the master, with this tiny, almost imperceptible shift in weight and just a flick of the wrist, sends this 250-pound attacker flying backward into the dust.
It's such a brilliant cinematic trope, and it shows up everywhere, right? In traditional physical disciplines all across the world.
Yeah, from Tai Chi to, like, various forms of bodywork, they call it effortless power.
Right, because there's this enduring human fascination with the idea of moving without muscular tension, like you're accessing some hidden reservoir of biomechanical power that the biggest guy in the room somehow just, doesn't know about.
Totally. And the master always says something incredibly cryptic to the student afterward, something along the lines of, do not rely on muscle strength. Let the force travel through the body. Use the tendons.
Which sounds incredibly cool in a movie.
It does, but I mean, when you look at that from a modern physiological standpoint, it sounds like pure poetry. So today, we are bringing a fascinating stack of research notes into the deep dive to figure this out.
We really are. The main document we're working from today is titled The Muscle Tendon Unit, as the tension system connecting deep and superficial muscles.
Yeah, and our mission for this deep dive is to decode those ancient, seemingly mystical martial arts cues. We're going to put them under the microscope of modern biomechanics and exercise physiology.
And figure out how you, the listener, can actually apply this concept of effortless power to your own everyday life.
Right. Because, okay, let's unpack this. There is a glaring biological contradiction right out of the gate with that movie master's advice.
You mean the problem of voluntary contraction?
Yes. From a modern medical standpoint, you literally cannot voluntarily contract a tendon. I mean, muscles have contractile tissue, right? They generate force when your brain tells them to.
Exactly. Tendons are connective tissue. They do not generate force on their own command.
So when a master says use the tendons, are they just relying on a scientifically inaccurate metaphor? Or is there actual hard science hiding inside that phrasing?
Well, to find the science there, we basically have to fundamentally update our working model of anatomy.
Okay, how so?
We have to stop looking at the human body as a collection of isolated parts that are just bolted together. Because when we hear the word tendon, we usually imagine a biological rope.
Like a piece of string.
Right, just a passive, inert piece of string tying a muscle belly to a bone.
Mm-hmm.
But to understand the physics of effortless power, we have to move completely away from that isolated view.
Because they aren't working in a vacuum.
No, not at all. In modern biomechanics, we don't look at the muscle and the tendon as separate entities. They don't take turns. They function as a single, integrated continuum.
And the medical term for this, based on our source, is the muscle tendon unit, or the MTU.
Exactly. So in practical terms, human movement isn't just a muscle flexing and pulling a bone. It's a highly coordinated mechanical wave.
Oh.
Yeah, think of it like this. The muscle fibers fire. That tension cascades into the tendinous tissue, and then that tension acts upon the skeletal structure. The entire chain acts as one unit.
Okay, let's trace how that unit actually behaves in motion. Because the source material points out that this system isn't just, pulling levers. It's managing force in a really sophisticated way.
It absolutely is.
Like, if we think about that martial arts master throwing a strike, the force doesn't originate in the shoulder or the arm. It starts when their foot pushes against the ground.
Right, the ground reaction force.
Yeah, so the kinetic energy travels up the leg, through the hips, across the torso, and eventually out through the hand. And the tendons serve as the essential transmission cables for that whole kinetic wave.
What you're describing there is force transmission.
Mm.
And it's honestly the only way human beings can generate immense power.
Because if you just use your arm...
Exactly. If you try to throw a punch by only contracting your shoulder and arm muscles, you isolate the force. You trap it locally in a really small area.
Which is super inefficient.
Extremely. But the muscle tendon unit is designed to efficiently distribute muscular force throughout the entire skeletal structure. So when the master says, let the force travel through the body, they're giving a literal instruction.
They're saying to utilize the MTU's transmission capabilities rather than isolating a single muscle group.
Right.
But the MTU isn't just passing that force along like a stiff piece of wire, right? It actively changes the energy dynamics.
Yes, and this is crucial.
Because when we run or jump or even just walk, we don't feel like we're manually contracting our calf muscles from scratch with every single step. If we had to rely purely on muscular contraction for every inch of locomotion, we'd burn through our cellular energy reserves in
Well,
minutes.
we'd be exhausted just walking down the driveway.
Exactly.
And this is where the elastic properties of the MTU become vital. When a tendon is loaded with weight or momentum, it stretches. And as it stretches, it stores mechanical energy.
Kind of like pulling back a heavy rubber band.
Perfectly said, like a heavy rubber band. When that tension reaches its peak, the tendon recoils, and it releases that stored energy back into the movement. Your Achilles tendon is a great example of this.
Oh, sure.
When your foot strikes the ground during a run, the Achilles stretches, absorbs the impact energy, and then violently snaps back to propel your body forward.
So you're effectively bounding on an organic pogo stick.
Literally, you're utilizing stored kinetic energy rather than burning fresh cellular energy for every single stride.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Because viewing tendons as biological pogo sticks or transmission cables, well, it still implies they're just passive hardware.
Right, just mechanical parts.
Yeah, but the sources highlight a specialized class of sensory receptors called Golgi tendon organs. We tend to think of tendons as dumb rubber bands connecting the engine, which is the muscle, to the chassis, the bone. But they are actually smart springs packed with microscopic force sensors.
Smart Springs perfectly captures the physiology there. The Golgi tendon organs are these incredible microscopic structures, and they're located precisely at the musculotendinous junction.
That's the spot where the muscle and tendon meet, right?
Exactly. It's this twilight zone where the red muscle fibers interweave with the white tendinous collagen,
Hmm.
and their function is continuous surveillance.
Like security cameras for your muscles?
Basically, yeah. As the tendon stretches, the collagen fibers physically squeeze these nerve endings. The harder the stretch, the tighter the squeeze. And those nerve endings instantly translate that mechanical pressure into electrical signals,
And they fire those signals straight into your central nervous system.
right into the spinal cord and brain.
I want to clarify how this differs from other sensors in the body, though, because we also have muscle spindles, right? And those live inside the muscle belly itself.
Yes, muscle spindles are a different system.
Because those spindles are mainly concerned with length, like detecting how far and how fast a muscle is stretching to trigger a stretch reflex and prevent a tear. But the Golgi tendon organs are doing something completely different. They're measuring force.
They are acting as a highly calibrated tension meter. They monitor the exact mechanical load being transmitted through the tissue at any given millisecond.
That's wild.
It really is. So tendons are not just mechanical hardware. They are active sensory organs. They tell your spinal cord and brain exactly how much horsepower the engine is delivering to the chassis.
And the central nervous system uses that data to instantaneously adjust muscle recruitment, right?
Instantly. If the tension spikes to a level that might, say, snap the bone or tear the tissue, the Golgi organs trigger autogenic inhibition.
Which means?
They literally send an overriding signal that shuts the muscle off to protect the body. But in fluid, skilled movement, they provide the micro-adjustments necessary to modulate force with incredible precision.
Okay, this brings me to a massive practical question for our listeners.
Let's hear it.
If human beings come factory equipped with this brilliant energy-storing, force-transmitting, smart spring network that meticulously calculates tension, why do we so often feel terrible?
That is the million-dollar question.
Right. I mean, think about your own day. How often do you feel stiff, tight, clumsy, or just exhausted doing completely ordinary things? Carrying a heavy load of groceries, wrestling a toddler into a car seat, or just climbing a steep flight of stairs.
Yeah, the everyday grind.
Exactly. If we have this built-in system designed for effortless power and fluid efficiency, why does our smart spring fail us so consistently?
That is the most important pivot point in the research. And to answer it, we have to look at the environment the tendon is operating in.
The environment.
Yeah, the muscle tendon unit is an engineering marvel, but it has a non-negotiable core dependency. It absolutely requires a stable foundation. It cannot function in a structurally compromised environment.
Oh, I see. It needs a rigid scaffolding to pull against.
Exactly. And in the human body, that scaffolding is provided by the deep stabilizing muscles.
Okay, so we're moving away from the big superficial muscles now.
Right. We're talking about the small, intrinsic muscles that sit incredibly close to your skeleton. Muscles like the multifidus along your spine or the deep rotators deep inside your hip socket.
And what's their main job?
Well, their primary job is not to move you across a room. Their job is to maintain your spinal alignment, stabilize your pelvis, and keep the ball of your joints perfectly centered in their sockets. They are your structural integrity.
Okay, I have to challenge this, though.
Go for it.
If my superficial muscles, my massive quads, my lats, my big shoulder muscles, if they're the largest and strongest tissues in my body, why shouldn't they just do all the work?
It seems logical, right?
Yeah, why do I even need these tiny, invisible, deep muscles to hold my frame together? My superficial muscles clearly have the raw horsepower to hold me upright and move me forward.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it comes down to joint mechanics and leverage. Deep muscles typically cross only a single joint. And because they are so small and close to the bone, they act like tight biological shrink wrap.
Shrink wrap, I like that.
They pull the joint surfaces securely together. Superficial muscles, on the other hand, often cross multiple joints. Their leverage is designed for sweeping macro movements, steering and accelerating the body.
Okay, so they have different jobs.
Completely. If your deep muscles fail to anchor the bone, and you try to use a massive superficial muscle to move, the bone physically shifts or wiggles in the socket. The joint experiences microscopic shear force.
And the central nervous system hates shear force. It senses that the joint is dangerously unstable.
Exactly. It immediately senses the threat of dislocation or cartilage damage. So what does the nervous system do? It panics.
It freaks out.
Right. It commands those massive superficial muscles to clamp down as hard as they can to act as emergency stabilizers. The big muscles lock the entire area down to prevent the joint from shearing.
Wait, so let me make sure I'm translating this right. If my deep posture muscles are slacking off, maybe from sitting slumped at a desk all day, my skeleton loses its natural stable alignment.
Yes, you lose that core framework.
But I still have to walk up those stairs. So because my deep stabilizers aren't centering my joints, my superficial muscles are forced to pull double duty.
That's exactly it.
They have to rigidly lock down to keep my skeleton from collapsing while simultaneously trying to propel me up the stairs.
Which is an anatomical disaster.
Sure.
Superficial muscles are entirely unsuited for long-term, low-grade stabilization. They fatigue quickly. When they are forced to act as the frame of the car and the engine simultaneously, the body's tension at work fragments.
It fragments.
Yeah, instead of force flowing smoothly through the whole kinetic chain, it gets trapped in isolated areas.
Man, this explains so much about chronic everyday stiffness.
Doesn't it?
Yeah. The reason your lower back or your shoulders feel like concrete isn't necessarily because you work them too hard at the gym. It's because those superficial muscles are clamped down in a state of constant emergency stabilization.
They become rigid. They get exhausted.
And because they're gripped so tightly, they interrupt the force transmission of the MTU.
You lose the spring. If the superficial muscle refuses to relax, the tendon cannot stretch and recoil freely. You are entirely bypassing the elasticity of the MTU.
Wow.
This forces you to rely on raw, localized, chemical muscle contraction for every single inch of movement. You burn through your energy reserves rapidly. You feel heavy and tense.
So you're literally just muscling your way through life.
Muscling through it perfectly describes the mechanical failure of the MTU.
So what does this all mean? Let's pivot back to that original mystery of the martial arts master, sending the huge guy flying.
The effortless power.
Right. When the master says, use the tendons, we now know they aren't literally flexing a tendon. They are describing a subjective physical sensation. They are describing what it actually feels like to operate an optimized muscle tendon unit.
Precisely. What that master has spent decades training to do is engage their deep, stabilizing muscles to an elite degree.
Setting the frame.
Yes. When the 250-pound attacker lunges, the master effortlessly aligns their spine and locks their pelvis into a perfect structural foundation. Because the deep musculature is doing its job flawlessly, the joints are perfectly centered. There is no shear force.
And because there is no shear force, the central nervous system doesn't panic. The superficial muscles don't have to rigidly clamp down. They can remain soft, relaxed, and pliable.
The superficial muscles just gently guide the movement. When the master shifts their weight, the enormous kinetic force generated by their legs pushing against the ground is seamlessly transmitted up through the tendon network, straight out through the arm and into the opponent.
None of the force is lost to localized muscle tension.
None at all. The entire body acts as a unified conduit for the energy.
The superficial muscles are acting as the steering wheel, while the deep muscles in the tendon network deliver the raw power from the ground up. The whole body moves as one connected structure.
That's why it looks effortless.
But the true value of this deep dive isn't about winning a fight in a courtyard. This applies directly to you, listening right now. This completely reframes everyday movement.
It really does. Think about the simple act of lifting a heavy box off the floor.
Okay.
If you approach that box with a compromised structural frame, and you attempt to lift it by just gripping with your arms and hauling upward with your lower back, you are relying entirely on superficial muscles.
Which is going to hurt.
Oh, absolutely. You will feel immense strain, your muscles will fatigue instantly, and you risk severely shearing the joints in your spine.
But if you apply the physics of the MTU, you completely change the equation. Before you lift, you actively set your deep core. You align your spine and stack your joints. You give the MTU its rigid scaffolding. Then, instead of hauling with your back, you use your arms merely as meat hooks, just attachments to the box. You push the floor away with your feet, allowing the massive tendon networks in your hips and legs to take on the load, stretch, and release that elastic energy to bring you upright.
The subjective experience of that movement is radically different. When you utilize the stored elastic energy rather than raw muscular force, you experience a massive reduction in muscular effort.
Your movements become smoother.
The body feels powerful without feeling strained.
That is the physical state everyone is chasing, being powerful without being tense. And I just think it's beautiful how this modern biomechanical research validates the historical cues.
Amazing.
Right. Those martial arts masters centuries ago, they didn't have MRI machines. They couldn't measure the electrical impulses of Golgi and tendon organs. They didn't even have the vocabulary of the muscle tendon unit.
But through relentless observation of their own internal physical sensations, they mapped the territory with astonishing accuracy.
Yeah, their cues to become one connected structure or to not push with muscle are perfectly consistent with the physiological mechanisms of force transmission and deep muscle stabilization that we can now prove in a laboratory.
Science just caught up to the sensation.
It really did. So let's pull all of this together into a clear picture of what we've discovered in these sources. First, your tendons are far more than dumb biological ropes. They are an integrated network of smart springs packed with force sensors that constantly calibrate your movement.
Right.
Second, your deep stabilizing muscles act as your vital scaffolding. If they fail to secure the joints, the system collapses into stiffness.
Yep.
And third, your large superficial muscles are meant to be the steering wheel and the accelerator, not the permanent frame holding the car together. When you synchronize those three elements, you stop muscling through your day and start utilizing the incredible built-in elasticity of your own anatomy.
That synthesis covers the core of the research beautifully. But, analyzing this data on human biomechanics and tension sensing, well, this raises an important question.
Oh.
It's a logical extension of the MTU's mechanics that wasn't explicitly resolved in the source material, but it's impossible to ignore when we look at modern life.
Okay, I love an extrapolated theory based on the data. Where does this lead us?
Consider the evolutionary environment of the muscle tendon unit. Human tendons, and specifically the Golgi tendon organs, evolved over millions of years to function as an incredibly delicate, highly efficient force-sensing network.
Okay, tracking with you.
They evolved to constantly read the ground, measure the exact kinetic impact of every step, and instantaneously adjust the tension in our legs and core. And they evolved to do this while our ancestors were completely barefoot, or at most, wearing a thin layer of protective leather.
So the sensors relied on direct, unmuted contact with the earth to gather their data.
Precisely. They required hard ground reaction forces to calibrate the microtension in the muscles. So look at what we do today. We encase our feet in modern, hyper-cushioned shoes. We walk and run on an inch or two of high-tech artificial foam spring strapped to the bottom of our feet. Are these artificial foam springs actually blinding our natural tension sensors?
Because by putting all that thick, dampening foam between the hard ground and the sole of our foot, we're acting like a muffler on the kinetic signal.
We are dissipating the very kinetic feedback the Golgi tendon organs rely on. If the foam absorbs the sharp impact, the central nervous system receives a fuzzy, muted signal. It is essentially forced to guess how much force is interacting with the foot.
And when the central nervous system is forced to guess about stability, what does it do?
Exactly, what does it do?
It defaults to panic. It commands the superficial muscles to tense up, just in case.
By structurally blinding the sensors at the very base of our kinetic chain, we might be actively short-circuiting our own muscle tendon units.
That is a wild thought.
We could be inadvertently forcing our superficial muscles to work significantly harder than they ever did in a state of nature. It is a very real possibility that our modern footwear, designed for ultimate comfort and shock absorption, is structurally encouraging the very double-duty fatigue and chronic stiffness we are trying to escape.
That completely changes how I look at a pair of running shoes. I mean, if we are muting the ground feedback, we are essentially turning off our own evolutionary hardware and forcing the engine to work twice as hard.
It's definitely something to think about.
For everyone listening, I want to challenge you to bring this awareness into your own life today. Pay close attention to how you are physically moving through your environment. When you stand up from your desk, when you reach for a heavy pot on a high shelf, or when you are just hauling the garbage out to the curb, notice what your body is doing.
Are you tensing up?
Right. Are you muscling through the action with tight, rigid, superficial tension? Or can you pause, engage that deep core to set your frame, and let your smart spring MTU manage the load?
It's all about that foundation.
Exactly. See if you can find that subtle shift, that feeling of being powerful without being tense. Try to channel just a little bit of that effortless power the next time you're facing down a daunting physical task. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the hidden mechanics of the human body. We'll catch you next time.